she's a mountain, then you're in a...
Hi, everybody. This is Lori, and this is my podcast, Inclusivi-TEA Sustainability. It's actually a podcast that I do in collaboration with Alliance for Sustainability, which is a nonprofit in Minnesota. And the goal of our podcast is to talk with creative people about their creative path as well as about sustainability. And we're fortunate today because this is the second half of our interview with Kara Ward-Tobin, who is a wonderful creative woman who works in Hollywood and has had a lovely path to where she is and is, I think, going to be creating some wonderful films or plays or something that we're going to be watching. So we're excited to have her back for the second half. If you missed the first half of the podcast, please listen to it. We talk a lot about diversity in Hollywood and just about Kara's goals for the future and some advice for people coming up. And Kara, if you could repeat the advice, just in case somebody didn't hear the first episode, you had some really lovely advice for people when they're coming up.
Yeah, no, definitely. So my advice to anybody coming into this industry is, you got to be prepared to work hard. It's going to be very challenging. You just have to know that if you put your mind, like I honestly believe if anybody that puts their mind to something, if they work hard enough at it and they're passionate enough about it, they will be successful. So, and what's most important, what I've learned as coming into this industry is there's a lot of distractions along the way. There's these temptations to maybe want to climb the corporate ladder or to build up or what's going to make me the most money. Like once you're in it, all of a sudden, those are the things that can start to become important. But what you have to remember always is, why did you start this journey? Why did you come into it? What made you passionate? And keep those things really close to you. Keep those always there to recheck into, because burnout's true. Burnout's easy to happen, but if you can always go back to what's the most important to you, like, why am I here? Be true to yourself and you will be successful, but it's easy to lose yourself along the way. So you have to carve out time to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I love that. And I will say that I've done probably well over 20 of these podcasts now. And a very common theme is do things you love.
Yeah.
Be true to who you are, remember who you are. And if you get lost, go back to that and keep going back to it and explore. I hear from people all the time, explore paths and really open your eyes. So it sounds like going to California for you, going to Hollywood, is that's really what you did, is you got there. I'd like to hear just a little bit about how you even got, like, how did you even move there? What was that?
Yeah. So I graduated school in Arizona, went to Florida to work for Disney for a year. Once my second internship came to an end, I was ready to come back I wanted to not come back. I haven't lived in California previously, but I knew that that's where I needed to go. So it was literally me and my now fiance, but boyfriend at the time. We rented a van. We packed it, a minivan, packed it up with all of our belongings and drove across the country and we stopped in LA. He's from San Francisco, went to San Francisco first, get our bearings. And then with a group of friends that we went to college with, found a house. Like none of us had jobs when we got here. Like none of us had savings. Like we just really kind of took a leap of faith, moved into the cheapest house we could find. There were 7 of us. So, and really just, that's how the journey started. So, I mean, you have to be scrappy there in the beginning and prepare for some hard times, but it was great. Like I wouldn't replace it for anything. It was a wonderful journey and it was really fantastic to have that community already built in when we arrived, because cities like this and it can be a lonely business for sure, especially in the beginning. Even though you're surrounded by people, it's easy to get lonely.
And did you find work fairly quickly or did it take a while?
So getting the work that I wanted took a while, but I mean, I worked in a coffee shop for a couple months. Then I worked at the Museum of Ice Cream for a few months. I worked for Klein Snacks as a brand ambassador. In the beginning, you're just, you want to find a flexible job that you can take, something to make some money, but also, leave that time for you to be creative and to really pursue those because applying for jobs and looking for jobs is a full-time job on its own.
Yeah.
So you have to leave in that time and be really flexible in the beginning.
Now, Kara, we talked in the last episode a little bit about writing and that's where your passion is now as far as creating your own projects. So do you have a set amount of time that you work every day? Do you have like a schedule, or do you write when you feel like it? What's the way you handle that?
Right now, I would say I kind of write when I feel like it, but I would 100% suggest a schedule. I've been most effective when I carved out time out of each of my day to, like, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was very good about it. Actually, I would like go out on my patio every day for like at least 30 minutes and write, especially on the weekends. I would take that time. My fiance would read, or he would do something that he wanted to carve out time for, and really, just get it out to like make yourself do it. It's a practice. So really, these creative things, especially if you want it to be your career, should be a deep practice, and you should be doing, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, you should try to do a little bit every day.
Okay. So you don't always do it, but that's your goal, is to do it every day. Now, do you have again, in the last episode, we talked a bit about how you're starting to feel like transitioning to doing more of your own stuff. So now you're an assistant, but kind of working towards doing your own stuff. Do you have projects that you're working on in particular that you would tell us about?
Yeah, so the thing that I think I want to do next is, so my projects and my like thesis, if you will, or my projects in college were called Women of War. So they were about a nameless war across time, telling women's stories from war, through all generations. And what I really want to do is I want to adapt that into a film medium, because as much as I love theater, we don't have as big a reach, obviously. It's not as accessible. Theater can be expensive. It's rare. There's short showings. It's much harder to share that, where film is, especially now with all the different platforms you can get media out on. It's a much more accessible medium. And I also think that it would be really fun to play with how we did this experimental theater piece, and how do we turn that into kind of an unscripted, either miniseries or, documentary film. And, what we want to do is take these same stories, do more research across the globe, and build in these women's stories firsthand, while always a big part of the original Women of War was movement and dance, and putting that alongside the words in these stories. And so I want to keep that true in the documentary style. So maybe, we're hearing these women's stories, but there is movement present on the screen while you hear it. Not just like your basic, like, stock footage or B-roll footage. You're going to see movement, because that's also a very healing practice as well.
Now, were these actual women who had been warriors or leaders of nations?
So they were all different, viewpoints from war. So some of them were, it's prisoners of war, or maybe it's the wife of somebody who was in war. So we're trying to see their perspective on these stories. Like Warsaw Shire, who actually did all of the spoken word for Beyonce's album Lemonade that came out a few years back. We used one of her poems, and it's just very powerful, because she talks about being, a refugee and having to flee your country during wartime, and kind of what that looks like. And because there are just so many different perspectives and different things in war, especially when it's the female story, that we don't always hear, and really kind of diving into those and giving a voice to those moments that maybe we hadn't heard before.
But it struck me because last week there's a company called Urban Intellectuals, and they have Black History cards. And last week they had a training that was specifically for parents who have Black children, but I sat in on it just to sort of hear it and hear some of that history. And it was excellent and upsetting, because we know none of it. And Black history, as you know, is human history, and it is a part of who we are, and we should be learning this in school. But the reason I was intrigued is that one of the things we talked about, and one of the things in the cards that I looked through, are all these women warriors who were, hundreds of years ago, but really fierce women warriors. And what an interesting part of our history that no one talks about.
Yeah. I mean, our education system especially is so westernized, and by that I mean it's based off of like an Anglo-Saxon European viewpoint, right? Like, I mean, even our like theatrical elements all date back to like how the Greeks did their theater. Like, it was that, that climax, that resolution, like bell curve of how our story programs work and how our narrative lines are, all stem from that. And there's a whole world that most people never even learn or explore because it's not brought into, even when we're learning world history, we're not really learning world history. We're learning just a little tiny chunk that serves its purpose for our stories, right? Because I was watching something the other day that I've like 5,000 years ago, there was this huge, like 5 million person civilization in Africa that they had running water. They had a language that no one's ever been able to decipher. And why am I just now learning about this? Like, when I've also sought out ancient culture history over and over again, and that's the first time I've come across it. Like, there's definitely a gap in our education system that we don't, because if you're not looking for the problem, like, you're not going to see it. So we really have to be very focused to, like, want to branch out our learning.
And it makes us all so much better. Knowing all of that history makes all of us better. And talk about children being able to see themselves.
Yes,
if
exactly.
every bit of history you learn about doesn't show you, then the message to you is that you have no history, which is so absurd that, I think.
And damaging to the psyche in ways that we don't really understand.
So
when the history tracks back to, like, we go back to the ancient Greeks, and then that's really it. That's all we really talk about. Like, that's not everybody. That's not the whole world. And there's so many interesting storytelling methods that are out there that aren't, if you look at just like kabuki theater in Japan, or like, the Yoruba culture and religion in Africa, and like their storytelling and their myths and mythology are so beautiful and interesting. They're like, why can't we learn about all of them and be exposed and have this because it just makes us better, more well-rounded people.
Yeah. Well, that film sounds fascinating. So just briefly, how do you even start to do that and really prepare it?
So I worked with in college a co-director who helped me with that. So she's definitely my creative partner. I always suggest for people that are trying to do a creative project to surround yourself with really positive, hardworking people too, because your project is only as strong as the people that are working on it.
Yeah.
So she's really always been helpful for me to keep me on track, and like, it's like an accountability buddy, if you will. Like, we keep each other on track, and if somebody's counting on you, you're going to get it done.
I like that, accountability buddy. I have never heard that before.
Right? It's so helpful.
I love it.
Somebody right? I think I use that all the time with my friends, whether it's like going to the gym or whatever. Somebody's you got to have that buddy.
Buddy. I think that's a fabulous word.
But the first step in doing, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd say what would be
the first step would really be doing your homework and laying out exactly what the film will look like, building out a budget. Like, what do you need? What's absolutely a necessity to get it done?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the script? Why are you doing this? So it's almost like writing up a project portfolio, like a Bible for it. So that because the next step is to get money. You've got to find funding. If you're not lucky enough, to have it yourself, you're going to have to go out there and hustle, apply for grants, do whatever you need to. And to do that, you've got to show people that you're serious about what you're working on. So if you can already come to them with like a full-fleshed idea, and like, this is the only thing that's stopping me is I need somebody to help me out, then you're going to be a lot more successful. And then also, if you've got a big project like that, don't be afraid to do smaller things on the side. You can film so much on just an iPhone these days. It doesn't have to be, winning awards at Sundance, but it's just showing people that you've got that creative eye. Like, you've just got to get some material together for that portfolio to present to people.
And do you have a portfolio of films at this point that you've done, short films or?
I should. It's my advice that I give to people. It's something I've been working on, like going all the way back to easily distracted. My life's been so focused on the lives of others and being that assistant and being so drained that I haven't put that focus in. But recently, that's been a big turn for me, is that I'm going to once again turn that focus back to me.
Well, I want you to, because I think we will benefit from whatever it is that you create. So I want you to do that.
Thank you.
Give yourself permission to do that, because I think it will be a benefit to all of us. So if you had to define sort of your life philosophy, sort of what keeps you going, what pushes you forward, what inspires you, what would you say it is?
I would say, so, I mean, jokingly and not jokingly, for as long as I can remember, my like catchphrase has been live your dreams. I say it to everybody, like, even if it's like, they're like, oh, I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm like, oh, live your dreams. So it's like, it can be just kind of like a joke, but honestly, it's something that I do live by. Like, what are my goals? What are my dreams? I can achieve them. Like, you know your strengths, you know you're smart, you know you're creative, you know all these things. You do have to tell yourself that sometimes, though, because it is, once again, like, easy to get distracted and easy to get put down by the world around you. So remember, your dreams are important, your goals are important, and you can achieve them. Don't let the naysayers say you can't do it. If all of it takes is someone to tell you can't do it for you to quit, then maybe it wasn't the path for you. But like, you've got to really fight through those moments and know that you can do anything you put your mind to. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but you can live your dreams if you want to.
Okay. And the last thing, is there anything else you want to talk about before I ask you our last question? Anything else that you haven't said you'd like to share?
I think we hit on a lot. I'm glad, I'm really glad that we had that diversity talk in the first session. It's, something that's really important to me and really important to working to help change that culture, as well as like just changing the whole culture in this entertainment industry to be a more positive vibe and be a more healthy way of life. It's something that I'm also really focusing on, because there is, like, especially in different, you've seen the movies and those stereotypes about bad bosses and bad experiences, because those do exist. And I think we're coming to a place where we don't have to have that anymore. We can change that way of doing business. We don't have to talk down to the people that are below us, or be cruel. And, as much as I love all of Joss Whedon's work, recently he's come out in the trades of being really hostile and hard to work with on set and being cruel. And all of a sudden, these people have felt like they felt safe to come forward and say these things, where I know he's not the only one that creates hostile work environments, especially in entertainment. But I'm so happy that we're at a place where people are finally speaking out against that.
Well, and I think that speaks to, in the first episode, we also talked about just the money and how that can shift things, and how people with huge amounts of money and a lot of power sometimes really lose touch with normal life, lose touch with how you and I live our lives. And I suspect that feeds into that mistreatment, or just almost belief that whatever you need to do is the most important thing. And you don't need to worry about other people's feelings. And I think it's a wonderful thing if that shifts, because I think that that really steals a person's humanity in a certain way. Like it steals their ability to connect.
It does. For the people coming up and the people that are, have become so disconnected that they think that that's just the way that you're supposed to be. Yeah, like it strips, like you said, a lot of humanity out of it, especially when it's art. We really need to have that up front and present.
Yeah, I agree. So the last thing I want to ask you, which is something I always ask people when they come on, is to tell a story from your life. And I like to preface it by saying it really can be any story that feels like yours. The goal of the story is just, what do you think of when I say, tell me a story about your life? Because I think it's fascinating what people come up with. And it's really interesting and personal to hear something, just a story. And so anything at all.
So let me, I'm trying to think. I should have come up with a good answer to this question already. But I'm trying to think if I should do something more recent or older. But this is the first one that came to my mind, so we'll go with that one. So when I was younger, like in my middle school age, there were a lot of like stressful factors in my life. I was, and really stressed out, even like for like a young kid, was like dealing with some levels of depression that I didn't realize I was dealing with. But I found an escape in Disney, which is why I love Disney so much today. One day, one of those travel DVDs came in the mail for Walt Disney World. Like, I popped it in and I watched it, and it just changed my life. So all of a sudden I became like obsessed with planning a Disney vacation. That's all I did. And talked to my mom about it, did chores to like come up with the money to like go for it. And then me and my friend were going to we're going to do this big trip. I was staying with my friend in North Alabama. I'm from Alabama. And my mom was putting us on a bus to meet her in South Alabama, right before you get to Florida to finish the drive. And so we got on that. We're 13, maybe. I think we're pretty young. So we're on this bus. we get down to the bus station. My mom's notoriously late for everything. And so we got there, and of course, she was not there on time, even though she was like an hour away in Mobile to drive over to this bus station. And so it's just me and my best friend Miracle, and we're just like in this little middle of nowhere town in Alabama. Like it's one of those like one street towns.
Yep.
And so we're just like walking around there. I remember us going into, we were like, where can we get food? And they were like, oh, there's a bar or a restaurant right around the corner. We walked in, and it was like a pool bar with like all of these like old men playing dominoes, and like it was just like kind of crazy adventure. So we walked around this like town in the middle of nowhere waiting for my mom. And then she got there, and her big surprise was that she had rented this like PT Cruiser convertible. But then my cousin came with her, my older cousin, and she packed way too much stuff. Like my mom told us, she was like, the car's small, so you've got to like consolidate. So me and Miracle like packed all of our stuff into one bag. And then my cousin had like so many suitcases and like hanging bags of clothes. So like me and Miracle were like sitting on top of her luggage in the back seat, like when the roof was down, like all with their heads cranked to the side. And then, so it was like this whole huge journey to get to Disney. And then that ended up being like one of the best trips, like, because me and Miracle had a lot of independence, because Disney's very safe. And like, if you're staying on property, you just like bounce around. But what I love about that is that like the best part of that was really the journey too. Mm-hmm. So like all of those stories, like as like weird and stressful as it was, like that's always like been such a fun story for me to tell. And so it's really about, to me, it's like that makes it about the journey and not the destination.
Well, and I love that, because it ties in with a lot of what you've talked about, that you're on this journey, and every part of it you're learning something from, and you're gaining something from, and you're keeping the destination in sight. So you wanted to get to Disney, right? You want to get to your career, but there are all these great things that are happening along the way. So you keep the destination in sight, keep heading that direction, and enjoy the journey while you're going.
Enjoying the ride. Yeah, totally.
That was perfect. So thank you so much for being here, Kara. It was, as I knew it would be, it was delightful to talk to you, and such a pleasure to learn more about you. And I look forward to hearing and seeing what you do in the future.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this, just having this chance to chat. This has been great.
Thank you. And everybody, this was Inclusivi-Talks, and our guest was Kara Ward-Tobin. Is that right? Excellent. And watch for Kara, because I think we'll see her in the future. All right. Thanks, everybody.
If she's a mountain